So before we get to Michael Whatley, RNC chair, let's get to the big three.
Number 3.
Today we take a very historic action that was 45 years in the making. In a few moments, I will sign an executive order to begin eliminating the Federal Department of Education once and for all.
Department of Education smashed. Why this might be the biggest thing Trump does and what will define his legacy. I'll explain.
Number 2.
This notion of toxicity in masculinity needs to be separated.
I think some of us scare them. I think I scare them a little bit why they spend so much time on this. No, I'm serious, because I can fix a truck. They know I'm not bullshit on this.
Yeah.
Tim, this guy is just clueless. The more he talks, the worse Democrats do. Governor Tim Walz. Dems unhinged and deranged, looking for a direction, a mission, and a leader. I'll explain that.
Number 1.
What's happening now with Musk is making them very afraid, and that's a good thing.
Tesla was permanently tarnished the moment Musk gave that Nazi salute.
All I want to see happen on my birthday is for Elon to be taken down. Yes.
That is a congresswoman. Yes. She wants a successful American billionaire who has seven American companies employing tens of thousands of people to be taken down. Trump, DOGE, and Tesla dominate this week as we learn more about them, the people behind Musk, bringing efficiency back to the government, and the price they are paying for getting America solvent again. Michael Watley joins us now. Michael, this has got to be caught you by surprise. When people step up and support Trump, sometimes they might have something work against them. They might not get a contract they wanted. I never thought that people would go out to destroy a successful electric car company, especially these green maniacs that really are the backbone of the Democratic Party.
Yeah, 121,000 jobs in the United States, an American-owned company that is making the exact kind of cars that they are trying to shove down everybody's throat. It is really remarkable, the hypocrisy that they are approaching this issue with, to go after a guy, to attack him for SpaceX, for daring to bring down people who've been stranded in space for 9 months. It really is a spectacular turn to see these people that are pivoting around on Elon Musk.
So in Bud Light, they decide, okay, I don't like what they stand for. There was a boycott, and they still haven't bounced back yet. But that's in Americans answering and making a decision. But blowing up Teslas at dealerships, harassing Tesla owners, graffitiing their cars with Nazi symbols around the country, and now in Canada, it's insane. Listen to these. This is John Cusack, Alex Winter, and Jasmine Crockett. Cut one.
What's happening now with Musk is making them very afraid, and that's a good thing.
Elon Musk only has himself to blame for tanking this company. Tesla was permanently tarnished the moment Musk gave that Nazi salute.
Starting with on March 29th, it's my birthday. And all I want to see happen on my birthday is for Elon to be taken down. Yes.
And on the 29th, they're planning a massive attack of Tesla vehicles, Tesla locations, Tesla charging stations, Tesla dealerships. Is there anything that can be done at the federal level? I know Donald Trump feels personally responsible. He had that, he went ahead and bought a Tesla the other day, symbolically supporting. What is it like inside the White House?
Well, what I can say right now is that you have domestic terrorists who are targeting Tesla and going after them with Molotov cocktails and firebombs. We've seen from Pam Bondi already an announcement that this is not going to be tolerated and federal charges are going to be brought. We saw that law enforcement officers moved very quickly to arrest 3 different people in 3 different cities for targeting Tesla this way. Look, this is about law and order now. It's not just about trying to take down a frankly iconic American company.
So Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez and Sanders are going the anti-oligarch tour. They're getting about 10,000 people. Last night they got 11,200 people. If you want to listen to their message, I think it might sound familiar to you. Cut 10.
Because when they like to call us radical, and what they like to call me as radical, I believe is common sense.
So she's going to try to steal Donald Trump's line, but her actions tell a different story. When you look at just from a political standpoint, you know what you're going to be up against in the midterms. What do you think about this?
Look, Donald Trump coined the common phrase party for the Republican Party because that's exactly what we are doing. This was a common sense campaign. The American people want a strong country. They want a strong economy. They want strong borders. They want us to be strong in the world standing. The Democrats right now are the party of open borders. They are the party of inflationary spending. They are the party that is fighting every day for waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal government. They not only had bad messengers in this last election cycle, they had a bad message. And as long as that's what they're going to fight for, they are going to lose because the American people want a strong country. That's why Donald Trump is over 50%. That's why the Democrats are at 20% right now. And they can try and co-opt the language all they want. But the American voters were very clear in this election cycle. This is the agenda that they want, and the Republican Party is fighting for them.
So one thing I have not seen before in 15 years is the infighting amongst Democrats. Yeah, there was maybe Manchin and AOC and the squad. All right. But it's not really consequential. It was just kind of interesting to hear. But they are looking for a direction and going at Senator Schumer like he's Donald Trump, trying to take him down, including Pelosi. And then you have a Senator Alyssa Slotkin who pretends to be moderate going after AOC. Listen to this, cut 13.
I can't just chain myself to the White House and become an activist full time because you and others here are going to call me for things that you need. All of those things require me to be more than just an AOC. Everyone you mentioned has a lot of words, but what have they actually done to change the situation with Donald Trump?
She's kind of right. I mean, they just talk, they just yell, they don't do anything.
Yeah, there's no question about it. The party is completely rudderless. And until they find a message that resonates with the voters, they're going to continue to free fall. This right now reminds me a lot of what the Democratic Party was like coming out of Jimmy Carter's defeat in 1980. And the fact is that the Republican Party under Donald Trump is completely a remade party. It's a party that's fighting for every family. We're fighting for every community. We're a party that listens to the voters, understands their issues, and puts solutions on the table. And until the Democrats adopt that type of a philosophy, they're going to continue to be lost in the wilderness.
So in New York, the Speaker Adrian Adams starts leading this charge to let illegal aliens vote. Bad enough they get driver's licenses. In 2022, the RNC went at him and sued. You do not let illegal aliens vote in New York City. Finally, last night, an appeals court, the highest court in New York, voted 6-1 against allowing that to happen. What role do you think the RNC played in this?
Well, we were the lead plaintiffs. We put together the coalition that filed that lawsuit, and we have seen this all the way through. And this is just one of dozens of suits that we have filed across the country to ensure that only American citizens are going to vote. In New York, the Constitution is very clear that you must be a citizen in order to vote. It was a 6-1 decision by the state's highest court, so we're very excited about that. But we have had continually a very aggressive legal strategy where we're going to fight to make sure that we have the right rules of the road in place before voting starts. We want to make sure that only American citizens can vote. We want to have a voter ID. We want to make sure that states are cleaning up their voter rolls, and we want basic protections on mail-in ballots. So this is a big win for the RNC, but more importantly, it's a big win for New York. They don't need 800,000 non-citizens voting in those elections. It absolutely has the ability to change the outcome across the board there.
So they did a poll, Fox News poll among I guess we do the way we do all the polls, not just our viewers. And they said out of all the Trump policies, and there's a lot, what's the most popular? So the top 5, really not a surprise. Ban trans and women's sports, make English the language, deport illegal immigrants. These are all 60%. 54% acknowledge only 2 genders. 53% increase drilling. Reduce government employees, 46%. End DEI, 45%. Take over of Panama Canal, 39%. Close Department of Education, 32%. Rename the Gulf of Mexico, 31%. And Greenland, 26%. Let's start with education. What is that? Does it change your mind knowing that only 32% of the American public want to dissolve the Department of Education?
Well, right now, the American public are under the impression that President Trump is going to end federal spending in education, which would be very unpopular. The fact is, President Trump wants the federal money going to the kids. He wants it going to the schools to pay for teachers. He does not want it going to the Department of Education, where they have spent $3 trillion creating an educational bureaucracy over the course of the last several decades. We want to make sure that American kids are going to be educated. We're not just going to be paying for a bloated education bureaucracy, which is where we are today.
So that these polls are interesting, but they're not something you're going to jump off of, jumping off points?
President Trump has made it very clear that his agenda is going to move forward because he's fighting for the American people. The polls have never been drivers. When he ran on making sure that we're going to have a rebounding and strong economy, he ran to make sure we're going to have a strong southern border, that we're going to have communities that are going to be safe. You know, part of that was making sure that the education for our kids is going to be solid. These are the things that he ran on, not because they're popular, but because the American people need this. So, no, I mean, he is not going to have a poll-tested agenda. What he's going to do is fight for the American people. And in this case, he's fighting for every child in America to get the education that they need to be able to compete in the world economy.
Last week, you released a number of seats that Republicans are contending for in the House. You know the way tradition has it. The party in power usually pays a price in the midterms. Donald Trump lost the House in the midterms last time. And your thought about and your strategy for bucking the trend.
Well, first thing, you got to have the president deliver. And he is doing that right now on every single thing that he campaigned for. We need Congress to make sure that they deliver. We need to see the Trump tax cuts extended. We need to see this reconciliation bill pass. And we need to make sure that we are getting into legislation a number of the changes that the president has been making regarding men and women's sports, regarding a strong military, and regarding a strong economy. Right? Those are going to be very, very critical. And we also need to make sure that we have the resources that we need in order to win the election. We've got to be able to get that message out there. And we are very, very excited that Vice President Vance has agreed to come on board as the finance chair at the RNC to make sure that we can raise the money that we need to be able to win in this election cycle.
So now you have Georgia, a chance for a pickup in the Senate. You have New Hampshire, a chance to pick up in the Senate. And you have Michigan, a real chance to pick up in the Senate. Have you had success with Governor Sununu trying to convince him to run for that seat?
Well, he certainly gives us a great chance to be able to win that seat. Certainly have talked to him over the past several years, frankly, about getting him into that race. We will see what it looks like. I know that he is considering it right now. We also have great candidates that are looking at it in Michigan. Brian Kemp, who's looking at it down in Georgia.
What do you think about Brian Kemp?
A very, very strong.
When do you think he'll
very
make
strong candidate?
When do you think Mike Watley he'll have to get back to you if he's serious about running? When do you think you have to form that campaign?
Well, right now, what he has said is that he is not going to make any decisions while the Georgia legislature is in session, and so they've got a couple more months before they're going to finish up what they're doing down there, and then he will sit down and have a conversation with his friends and family and take a hard look at it.
Okay, and do you want Rogers to run?
Well, I think that Mike is definitely taking a look at it. We've got a number of other candidates that are taking a look at it. That he came within 18,000 votes up in Michigan in the last election cycle certainly would be a strong candidate there.
All right, so we'll see. I guess we'll see what happens. Money still coming in on the RNC? What kind of pace are you at?
We're at a very good pace. We feel very comfortable about the fundraising, and that is coming in primarily because our donors, our supporters, our investors are very happy with the election results from last year, but they're also very happy with what they're seeing right now with the president and his actions in the White House, as well as what we're seeing across the administration and in Congress. So they understand that we're going to either have a 2-year presidency or a 4-year presidency based on how these midterms come out. What we saw coming out of the 18 midterms when we lost the House was that it really, truly had an impact on the president's ability to get his agenda done. and we can't let that happen again.
Right. Slim margin in the House, and you have a better chance of expanding than losing in the Senate. But we'll see what happens. Michael Whatley, thanks so much.
Yes, sir, Brian. Take care.
We did put 235 judges, progressive judges, judges not under the control of Trump last year on the bench, and they are ruling against Trump time after time after time.
There's not lying. Chuck Schumer, they're winning and losing some cases, but almost all these executive orders are being challenged in court, district court. And depending on where it's being heard, Trump's having a hard time. Win some, lose some. But bottom line is he's not getting his agenda off smoothly. It's wasting time, slowing him down. With me right now is Jim Trusty, former federal prosecutor attorney, former defense attorney for President Trump when he was a candidate getting set to run again before all those cases were dismissed. He was also very optimistic, more than others, that Trump was going to prevail, especially in the documents case. Jim, your thoughts about the 60-plus injunctions on the president's agenda?
Yeah, I mean, this is just lawfare continued unabated. And you have to remember, we get frustrated at these district court judges, but there's an army of lawyers out there that are literally waiting to pounce every day on something that comes out of the Oval Office. And so they're litigating in, favorite venues in front of favorite judges. Frankly, I think they even pick venues where the appellate judges are going to be heavily Democratic and maybe predisposed to help them. So it's putting a lot of pressure on the system. And again, the judges tend to be very friendly. They had a hearing in Washington on Saturday because the ACLU and others said this is really an emergency, Judge Boasberg. So, they're finding the right places to file. It's putting DOJ and the White House on its heels a lot. And I think all of this, again, it's lawfare. It puts pressure on one place and one place only. That's the Supreme Court. Eventually, Justice Roberts, for all of his reluctance to wade into these very important political moments, they've got to find a way to put an end to lawfare. There's a possibility of Congress, kind of codifying a lot of the executive orders. But beyond that, it's on the high court to shut down the lower courts.
So Jim, didn't this happen before with Democrats? And when Barack Obama was signing all his executive orders, did it not occur to Republicans to do the same thing? Did something change?
Well, part of it is getting that phalanx of lawyers out. Big law across the United States is kind of notoriously liberal in most instances. And some of that's a philosophy, kind of a culture of the big law firm, that they tend to be on the liberal side of things or the Democratic Party side of things. Some of it, I think, is green, not red or blue. It's that they're concerned that their clients are going to cancel them if they come out in favor of anything to do with President Trump. So, yeah, you're right. I mean, the injunction numbers are through the roof for President Trump compared to any other sitting president in modern history. And again, I think it's kind of a cultural bias in the big law firms. I'm at a small firm. We have 4 different partners that have completely different philosophical or political views, and we're all tolerant of each other and of our clients. I mean, I have everything from President Trump as a client to Hope Solo. So, we're different. I think a lot of the smaller firms are, and that's where President Trump has had probably more success, either defending him or helping him on these crazy challenges.
Hope Solo and Trump are very similar in their respective occupations. Hope Solo, the best goalie, but not without controversy. And Donald Trump, a lot of people think very similar clients. Okay, so you see that Bush had 6 injunctions, Obama had 12, Biden had 14. The first time Trump was in office, 15, but now it's 64. So let's break them down individually. You read this a lot. You read I will read the summaries. You read all probably. But let's go to the case with the TDA and MS-13 gangsters being flown into El Salvador. A judge looks at this Saturday, thanks to the ACLU and a group called Democracy Now!, financed predominantly by George Soros. And they said, we have to worry about the rights, the due process of these 261 illegals that crossed in and committed a crime and are going to another country. The judge goes, I hear you, turn the plane around. And we go, it's too late. It's in international skies. They land. We all saw the video. The judge is spending all week trying to find out, was the plane really in air? Looking at his FlightAware app and trying to find out from the Justice Department exactly who did what and where. What is the judge's problem with this?
Yeah, well, clearly it's the people that are doing the deportation is the judge's problem. I mean, the judge basically gets together on a Saturday and says, I need answers to these questions by Tuesday. He eventually gave till Thursday. Meanwhile, the Trump attorneys are basically trying to get a stay from the circuit court to shut down the district court. And I think they had very well-founded reservations. I mean, this judge asking factual questions, kind of like the king from on high, saying, answer my questions within 24 hours. It's all a setup for contempt. You know, these are not questions about, do I even have any jurisdiction to address this issue? These are questions about, did you mislead me? Are you disobeying my nationally imposed injunction
as a district judge?
Notice hearing.
But as a district judge, he feels like he's wielding his power to stop President Trump's view of immigration, illegal immigration. But let me ask you this. Is the judge worried that we scooped up somebody who just might be just standing by on just picking up his free food at the Roosevelt Hotel and not a gangster? Is he worried about who the 261 are? Or is he worried about just sending illegal immigrants to another country? Like, what is the worry? So how do we address it if we don't know what his problem is?
Yeah. Well, look, we shouldn't have to crawl into his head to figure that part out, because the court really has no basis to be attacking, pure executive functions at the highest level from the executive branch. I mean, the best you can say about this issue is not really about any of the individuals, which were apparently all part of the Venezuelan gang, which, again, they don't have a right to be in the United States. It's a privilege to be here. So I have really no problem with very quick, effective executive branch moves to deport them, not having judicial oversight. But the best you can say is there's an issue as to whether this Alien Act applies because are we in war at this point? That's the kind of the legal hook to say, hey, they're pretending we're at war and this is a wartime power. But that's not the kind of stuff that leads to the questions this judge has been having. And they frankly even said, we don't want to give it to you in chambers. We don't want to give it to you under seal because we're concerned you're just going to turn around and release it to the ACLU and those others without any chance for us to fight this thing. And I got to say, they're walking towards contempt. Might not be a bad idea, frankly, because you have a better chance of getting an appeal heard on the contempt issue than you do on the injunction. But they're it's kind of an impossible march. I mean, you can't help but march towards contempt when you're not getting time to resolve issues of state secrecy, of international diplomacy, as well as. So we got to get this up the ladder.
You got to get the courts. You got to get this up the ladder. Off is good to go, because you got to be able to send these people out. We don't want to keep them here. We want to get them going. Quick question. I was having this debate yesterday. If you're an illegal immigrant and you're caught committing a crime, do you have due process?
You know what? That's a surprisingly difficult question. The history of this country has been we've treated you like you have the exact same constitutional rights just by physically being here. But it's not really settled academically or intellectually. I mean, you could argue that people that are non-citizens that are here illegally without any color of law don't share the same constitutional rights as the rest of us. Now, our courts typically treat them as having that right, but that's a really interesting question. Kind of like birthright citizenship. There's angles to it that make it a closer call than people might think.
So yeah, you're Lee Zeldin, you're at the EPA, and you say these contracts, I'm here, the EPA director. I don't like the direction they're going. I want to save the country $120 to $100 billion in these green contracts. That's not the agenda. That's not in our best interest of the country. A judge says you cannot do that. Why? Because that was involved in the Inflation Reduction Act passed by Congress. Tell me, Jim, if you're Lee Zeldin's lawyer or working for the EPA, how do you fight that?
Yeah, I mean, you do two things. You always try to elevate these things because I think the Supreme Court will be more protective of the executive branch than the judicial branch has been. And I think you have to work the Congress angle. I think they're finally waking up to the fact that when you're talking about executive orders or when you're talking about the power of the purse, which is predominantly a congressional power, that you might have to go back to them to get things fixed. And I think for all these spending freezes, it's hopefully just a little bit of a Biden spending orgy hangover, terrible thought, but something where we're stuck with kind of the expenditures that Congress allocated from the last term, but going forward, we should have a lot more of a DOGE approach to how spending gets approved and how spending gets administered.
So what do you think? I mean, in other words, does he fight this out? I mean, or is he helpless? Does he have to spend money on projects he doesn't believe in? That he doesn't believe in the best interest of the country?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think you can, the starting point that seems the cleanest ground, and by the way, Richard Nixon took this on back in the day, and they passed a law that basically talked about impoundment. The executive branch can slow down the spending as long as it's within the same fiscal year. But if they want to actually stop the spending on a particular item, they've got to actually go back to Congress. And then the great solution, which now is not a solution, was the line item veto. Bill Clinton did this dozens of times where he could pick out expenditures and say no before the Supreme Court said that's unconstitutional. So it is a difficult kind of legal area, but I think the starting point is delay could help a lot. Getting a full impoundment, getting a full stop on these expenditures probably takes going back to Congress, and they need to step up.
So these big law firms went after Trump, and they've been doing it since he was president. And then after he was president, and you had to deal with it and take them on. Perkins Coie, we know they're very much behind the dossier and the Hillary Clinton push to create some Russia investigation, and it was all a hoax. And then we have others like the Jack Smith law firms that pushed him forward, attacked the president. So he comes in there and goes, I'm suing you guys. I'm going to look to dismantle the powerful Washington law firms that are attacking Republicans, especially Trump. So Michael Schmidt, an investigative reporter with MSNBC, broke it down like this. And I want to get your take. Cut 40.
2 days after a federal judge says that one of these executive orders against another firm had been basically unconstitutional, Trump signs this late Friday against a law firm called Paul Weiss. Now, most people probably haven't heard of Paul Weiss, but in the legal world, they're a really big deal, and something that distinguishes them that they're made up of a lot of Democrats, a lot of Democratic donors. Chuck Schumer's brother is a partner there. A lot of former Obama administration officials work there. The person who prepared Kamala Harris for her debate is a law partner there. So a big D firm. And there had been a widespread expectation that this firm would go to court to fight this executive order. Legal experts say there's not a lot of legal merit to what Trump did. There was a clear sign from the courts that they would knock it down. But this firm did something differently. And the head of it, a guy named Brad Karp, goes and meets directly with Donald Trump. Now, Brad Karp is someone who in 2023 helped hold fundraisers for Joe Biden. He goes and he meets with Trump in the Oval Office, and they cut a deal.
So how do you feel about this whole scenario? Was new to me, but I don't live in the legal world. But I love that Trump is saying, now, I remember what happened last time. I remember what happened to me up until 2 months ago. I'm attacking this. How do you feel about what he's doing?
Well, he's not actually suing or criminally prosecuting these guys. He's saying, look, we're going to look at you. We may not do government contracts with you. You may lose your security clearance. Again, think about people that were capable of creating Russian dossiers over at Perkins Coie and shipping it to the FBI, essentially knowing it's a political document. To distract for several years from the administration. So he's got a beef. He's got a beef with the culture of these big D law firms. And by the way, the one that we're talking about, Paul Weiss, that's Mark Pomerantz's firm. This is the guy that actually got so frustrated that Alvin Bragg was not going to prosecute that joke of a case in New York that he wrote a book. A prosecutor writing a book of how I know this guy's guilty even though we're not charging him. It's completely unethical conduct. So, I don't blame the president for looking into this stuff. It's creating a huge legal stir. In the D.C. area, all the law firms are aflutter saying we're about to be thrown into Guantanamo. I don't think it's quite that disastrous or that serious, and it could be much more significant lawfare coming from the White House than we're seeing. But look, he reached a settlement with Paul Weiss that kind of speaks volumes about his motivations. He said, if you guys will stop the DEI hiring practices, if you'll help me out with some groups that fight anti-Semitism, if you'll help me out with some veterans groups, I'll let you off the hook. That's a pretty selfless approach to going after a big law firm. He's just saying, you got to be willing to represent people from all parties. You've got to do a few things to show that you're not monolithically part of the Democratic Party. And apparently Paul Weiss is okay with that. So, I don't think that's some humiliating end for a big Democratic law firm. I think it's a bow to the reality of the current state of politics in the United States. And it shows Trump was being pretty temperate in his approach to working out a deal with these guys.
Have you heard anything like this before?
Never.
Right.
All new territory, Brian.
It's amazing. All right. So, I'll talk to you. We've got to stay in touch, Jim, with all this working its way up. Just real quick on Mahmoud Khalil, who was going to Colombia and was picked up on a green card for advocating for Hamas and the Palestinian movement. and the takeover of Hamilton Hall is in Louisiana. Will be at a hearing today. He wants to have his hearing and his day in court in New Jersey. Your thoughts about him picking a state that on its surface is a Democratic state?
Yeah, I mean, look, the fact that it's a Democratic state never guarantees you, kind of favorable political treatment by a Democratic judge. But there's at least a correlation. It's not, maybe not direct causation, but you certainly are seeing in lawfare in particular, law firms landing in D.C., Maryland, Northern California, Rhode Island. They know what they're doing when they pick these venues, and it sounds like he's kind of got a good sense that he might do better in New Jersey than he would do in some other states. Again, being in the United States as an illegal or even with permission is a privilege, not a right. I think it's just kind of astounding that these law firms are stepping up and trying to create all these procedural obstacles to removing people that don't have an absolute right to be in the country.
I am concerned, Jim, that if the administration loses this, it's going to be a free-for-all with these green cards. We got to get smarter about the people we bring to these colleges, and we got to get smarter about people that want to go advocate for a terrorist movement, let alone the anti-Semitism that comes along with it in this case. Jim Trusty, thanks so much.
Yep, good to see you, Brian.
Right. It's just incredible how much you need a lawyer on everyday news. Back in a moment.
I think everybody should really enjoy taking this guy down and this stock down. And because of the example it will set, the only way to stop that is if the people who have the money are afraid of us. We have to make them really afraid. And what's happening now with Musk is making them very afraid. And that's a good thing.
So that's that washed up actor, John Cusack, who is sitting there in his basement somewhere or between his bunk beds, making an announcement that who's we? Who are you addressing? That we have to go make Tesla owners and Elon Musk very afraid. Now, is that a threat? I believe that's a threat. People don't think that's a threat. I think that's absolutely a threat. They even picked out a date, March 29th. What are you going to do? You're already firebombing dealerships, throwing Molotov cocktails through glass windows, putting graffiti on people in random suburban neighborhoods, let alone smashing their cars when they go shopping. Tyrus, you're here, Fox Nation host, of course, author of Enough Stuff, host of Maintaining Tyrus on OutKick. You see him every night just about on Gutfeld, and he's going to be on One Nation, a career-defining appearance, according to reports, Sunday at 10 o'clock.
That was from the Kilmeade Press, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
And by the way, what was it? Enough. What did you say? Enough. What was that?
What did I say?
He gave me a new cover for a new book. It's Enough Said, but he gave me an idea. He said something else. Enough. It was good. What was it? Enough Stuff. That'll be book 3. Thank you. You coined the phrase here.
So, Eric, you're just talking to my guests? You're circumventing me?
Eric and I are solid.
All right.
When I filled in for you. By the way, congratulations on the record-breaking numbers that day.
So, Tyrus, what do you think about that? I mean, I'm outraged by this.
I'm as angry as you are, and I think it's good that you're showing this part of your personality because it is ridiculous. It is. But this is the one administration where I don't think this is going to be tolerated. And why is this not a hate crime? Why are they not being, if it's domestic terrorism, there's a great place called Guantanamo Bay. Like, they need to be treated as, and the people who are fanning these flames, they're liable. And there should be lawsuits. And it should be, everyday Americans should be like, from what I saw, they should be suing The Daily Show who's trying to make jokes out of it, or Kimmel who comes out and they're basically saying it's okay to attack someone when things don't go your way.
Yeah.
Could you imagine when the horrible things that were happening to people and conservatives on Facebook and you made the wrong post, you could lose your job if you stood up against vaccine.
Yeah.
How many Facebook's buildings were burned down? How many of the owner of Facebook's companies were attacked? Or no, when we didn't like something, we didn't buy it.
Yeah,
Bud Light. We didn't approve it. We didn't like it, so we didn't buy it. You do that all day. Don't buy a Tesla if you have an issue with it. But the fact that they're fanning flames, if we were saying that to encourage things like that, well, Fox would have us off the air. We wouldn't be on the air. The fact that they're allowed to be on the air and continue to do this just shows how far up.
So I see media. I picked up something I said this morning, and they said you have Crockett saying this is going to be a great day on the 29th. Do me a favor, take them down. What does that mean? Take them down.
Exactly.
What did Cusack just say? He said make them scared.
Yeah.
So how is that not a threat? And guess what? They are blowing things up.
Yeah.
They're blowing things up right now.
And they're blowing. Okay, here's another thing that people don't know about the smart cars, like the Teslas. Those fires are extremely hard to put out because of the lithium batteries.
Great point.
And a lot of fire departments do not have, they're poisonous, and they need a special blanket to put those fires out because they're so intense and so hot that a lot of times water's not going to do it. You have to wait for them to finish burning, which could lead to other cars, explosions, etc. So it's very difficult on the fire department. It's very difficult on the people who are there in the building. You're not hurting Elon Musk. Like, that's the part where it drives me insane. He's not feeling your pinch. His frustration, his concern is for his employees. This is an American company. So he could pull off all this stuff and go build in China or wherever the hell he wanted to do, and it wouldn't hurt him at all, but it would hurt the American people. And where's their argument? Cusack says all this stuff. Please tell me what your argument is. What is the issue? That he's going to find where the money goes? Or is it because somehow it's connected to you? I think the people who yell the loudest are the ones that we should be putting under the microscope.
Do you think they're getting afraid of Trump? I mean, you think about this. They're not going after Trump anymore, as like they used to. Well, they're going after Homan on immigration. They're going after Musk on DOGE. Stephen Miller, when he pops up, they're trying to say that Marco Rubio's on the way out and Walt's on the way. But do you notice it went from a guy that was constantly targeted to like, they were almost afraid, almost like it's not working. We're making him stronger. So we'll try to get the people around him.
Which would maybe get him off his game. You have to understand he has beaten them with the American people. Yeah. They had their moment. But I think it was a necessary moment. They had their small victory getting Biden in the office. And for 4 years, I think we all had to go through that. The frustration, the basically having a country without a leader or a bunch of interns running it. And I think that for everyone gave us perspective. We had 4 years with the Trump presidency and the things that he was saying that you could say it during that time, like, well, maybe he's exaggerating, maybe he's being off. Then we had 4 years of living it. And now he's in, and he is a completely different. He's calm, he's relaxed, he's been through it, he's battle tested. He doesn't fall for their traps anymore. So what they're trying to do is get Elon to fall for the trap, or Miller to. Now Miller will go there. Miller will go there with you. Yeah, he's a firecracker. But they tried it with RFK Jr. at Tulsi. They're trying to get those responses that they used to get out of Trump, because when you get those responses, that's the news cycle, and then you don't hear what Trump's saying because the news cycle is Tulsi Gabbard punched.
Right.
Such and such from whatever news source or whatever. So I think that's why they're going after. Plus, they're going after the money. And let's not be stupid. Listen, if I worked at the post office and in my bank account I had $30 million, everyone would be saying I was crooked, right? And a postman makes about the same as a senator,
right?
Maybe a little less. So now we're seeing it. And this is where the money's going to go. And we're seeing where the money went to this, and these charities and all this other stuff that all seem to go back to family members and themselves and always seem to find a way back. So I think that's what the attacks are really about.
So, yeah, I think so, too. Last night, an important moment. It's got to continue. They brought out one of the guys on Laura Ingram's show. Did you see it? And he's a Treasury Special Advisor, and he's with DOGE. And they said, what are you seeing behind the scenes? So he sat down with Bessent and Laura, and he just said, this is what I'm seeing. This is what he says. He goes, right now I'm at the IRS. And this is what he found. Cut 4.
Yeah, I've been brought in to look at the IRS's modernization program in particular, as well as the operations and maintenance budget. I really care a lot about this country, and this is a huge program that's currently 30 years behind schedule. And it's already $15 billion over budget. So the goal is to take, the IRS has some pretty legacy infrastructure. It's actually very similar to what banks have been using. It's old mainframes running COBOL and assembly. And the challenge has been, how do we migrate that to a modern system? Virtually every bank has already done this, but we're still using a lot of those same systems. And typically in industry, this takes a few years, maybe a few $100 million. And we're now 35 years into this program.
So he's not doing us a favor at the IRS. And they said, he goes, do you know they don't surge people when tax day? So there's no more people working on tax day than there is on Christmas Eve.
Yeah. Well, I think that's
we can't get anybody on the phone.
That's why, and when you do, it's an automated service. Yeah. So, but that's what we're seeing. And that's why their messaging is so irresponsible, because we're spending so much time on the small percentage of people who believe the things that they hear out of these MSNBC and CNNs and all that stuff, and then they go out and they apply it. So they're getting people to do what they want to do, and then you have these irresponsible senators saying, "Oh, for my birthday, do this and do that." It's because of when everyone should be, hey, full disclosure, let's get to the bottom of this. Let's save money. Who should be against it unless the money that they're talking about has been profitable and it goes to the people who are fighting it the most? So I think when they talk about a billionaire and you have 100 millionaire who's talking about the problem with billionaires, and that 100 million also happens to be a senator, I think that's a bigger problem. It's about time we started going, hey.
So I've been watching Gutfeld especially. This is the first time ever.
I'm sorry. It's been particularly rough on you the last week.
Oh, I didn't see that. Has it been?
Yeah. So, yeah.
Usually you guys pick that out.
There was some shots.
So 15 years, I've never remembered Democrats fighting each other. Yeah. And now it's nonstop. And it was happening last night. But this one in particular stood out to me because the only really tough guy that I know is Tim Walz. And finally, he's doing a podcast with my other idol, Gavin Newsom.
Yes.
And they were able to show their toughness last night, cut 15.
But I think this notion of toxicity in masculinity needs to be separated. And I think it's been conflated. And I think we're going to have to work on that a little bit. And I think there is a crisis.
I think some of us scare them. I think I scare them a little bit why they spend so much time on it. No, I'm serious, because I can fix a truck. They know I'm not bullshit on this. Yeah. I'm not putting this in people's grill. I don't know if my identity is not hunting. My identity is not football coaching. My identity is not, a beard and a truck.
So he is a real tough guy, and Republicans are afraid of him. You know Republicans.
Yeah.
Have they expressed this fear?
Listen, I'm going to say it. I don't think any of the Republicans or Democrats that we see that any of us have any physical fear of. It's more of when maybe we get their hands around our wallet, we get a little nervous. But
I think afraid that he's not going to run.
But Waltz, I'm my identity. You push this down our throat. Your team tried to run you as the man's man.
Right.
There is sot after sot after sot of them telling him about how he's a man's man and he wears flannels and he's outside. And yet, hey, listen, you're the one who took the dumb video holding a rifle like you never held one before. I'm the one who put him on blast when he was changing a clean air filter with another clean air filter in the truck. Tim, baby, if you got anyone to be mad at, look in the mirror or look at your team. They pushed who you were, and that's not who you are. It's okay to be a sensitive guy. It's okay to be, I volunteered coach for a little while, but I'm not a sports guy. Listen, your Madden performance against AOC gave us all the information that we needed. You even said a pick six was well planned and timed. Bruh, you're phony and you try to trick the American people. So the only person you should be mad at is yourself.
So he's not aware of this. He's not aware of what a fool he looks like. And either is a guy I think Mayor Glenn Jacobs, who's Kane.
Yeah.
He evidently has now challenged Tim Walz to a charity wrestling match, $10,000 to the charity of whoever wins. Now, Kane seems to be a big hulking guy. You know him?
Yeah, very well. Apparently he's a booker. And I just listen. I get it.
What do you think?
I get enough attention in the world, but the first person to call him out was me. I jumped on the line on Twitter.
You said you'd fight.
I said I'm your huckleberry. Like, hey, just say win wherever you want to do it. I even said on Gutfeld one hand. If I can't get him in one, hey, I'll move to Minnesota and I'll wear the flannels and start.
Did you hear back?
Hands. No, it fell on deaf ears. But Glenn he's doing it in charity and wrestling. See, because I misread the wrestling part. I thought he wanted to have an actual fight. Because he says you're afraid of us and he could kick everybody's ass, I believe.
Yes, yeah.
So I was
He's tough.
Let's do it. Let's just do it. Let's knuckle up. I was like, catch my fade. You know what that means. But Glenn wants to make it a charity, and because he's a giving guy. And all it takes is a snap of the finger, and he goes from Mayor Jacobs to Brother of Destruction Kane.
Have you met people in this world that are just unaware of what how they're being perceived?
Yeah, it's called a wife.
No, she lets you know how you really be perceived.
Yeah, but you can never tell her.
Right.
Yeah, but no, yeah. I meet people that are just unaware, or they live the bubble. You get the bubble a lot.
Yeah.
People that, especially on social media, I try not to read good, bad, or indifferent comments because they all have their issues. But sometimes I'll see someone like, hey, what you need to do. If you're gonna bench 600 pounds, you need to roll your elbow here, and then you look at a picture of them, and you're like, so where is this coming from? He's like, oh well, I used to go to the YMCA when I was 15. So.
But out of that ticket, Tim Walz and Kamala Harris, I thought Harris was just going to run for governor and that would be a nut. She won't even put her head out anymore. And it's him who thinks he's got the promising future. He thinks he's the face of the party.
I don't think Kamala will ever hold public office again.
Better not.
I don't think you can come back from. It wasn't that she was outfoxed. It wasn't that she lost. I think you can certainly lose an election and run a good election and still have credibility. But I think that this election was an exposure of her inability to lead, inability to communicate, and you have to be able to communicate. You can be full of it. We got enough people that are full of it that can communicate. But when you're full of it and you can't communicate, I just don't. I don't see any. Even in California is going through a metamorphosis right now, and our old buddy, old hand signal captain
Gavin Newsom,
he sees it.
Do you know they're $1 billion they're $1 billion shy of balancing their budget, and that they decided to, I guess 4 years ago, to give everybody Medi-Cal?
Yep.
Regardless of your immigration status, so it's destroyed their system.
They bankrupt the
country.
State that is one of the biggest economies in the world. That's hard to do.
And they burned down the biggest city, and they've been unable to rebuild
it.
They
can't rebuild because the bureaucrats and everything else is getting involved.
This is a consequential
time. That's the group that cuts the check. So finally in California, the group that was willing to be virtue signaling and just vote for their tent, they're now saying, oh, no, my life has been changed.
When we come back, Tyrus has been handled brackets of all-time presidents and how they're paired up. And I'm going to ask you, Tyrus, on the matchups that have been handed you in the spirit of March Madness, to tell me what president would beat what president. Back in a moment. Hey, we are back. President of the United States now taking questions from the press who actually get a chance to do their jobs again. It's kind of interesting. All types of questions and answers, no filter. Tyrus is with us now. Tyrus, you have dates up here. It looks like 30 dates. But you have certain, Ingrid called you and said there's only a couple that have seats open available, right?
Yeah, well, the tickets go fast. And I was told today because we added some dates. Grand Rapids, Michigan, which is April 3rd. Tickets are still available for that. And Middletown, Ohio, May 17th.
And I've been there. That is a great town.
That is a great town. I'm going to be in Ohio quite a bit because it looks like I'm got a couple more shows right before the big governor's elections, which I think will be the world will probably be watching that. Yeah, I think Vivek's got a good shot. I like Vivek.
Ohio's not easy.
No, it's not, because Ohio holds you to the test.
Is Tim Ryan going to hop in? He seems to be the guy that hops in every time.
I probably. I think, well, we'll see, because with DOGE and stuff, it might not be as profitable to run for office anymore.
And don't forget, you're going to be on One Nation. We'll put up.
Yes, we'll be on One Nation. Yep.
Sunday at 10 o'clock. So listen, I just handed you brackets for the old-time presidents.
For this.
You got it?
Yeah.
All right. So tell us the matchups and who do you think will win?
Okay. Well, first of all, I don't even this list. I'll highlight a couple, but I'm telling you right now, Abe Lincoln and John F. Kennedy. That fight is to a finish.
Right. But he had a back problem, and Lincoln was a wrestler.
They both had a death problem. So they're not going to make it. So looks like Andrew Jackson and Dwight Eisenhower will have a bye.
Why? You just think they're not going to survive? Good point, Tyrus. I never thought about that.
So I take Andrew Jackson over Dwight Eisenhower just because.
Jackson's a scrapper, and Eisenhower lived a pretty easy life.
Hey, you get on that $20 bill, you can do those things. And then George Washington and George Bush. This is tough because George Washington.
Is it W or HW?
It's a W. W can throw.
Right.
I would stand back to back with him.
I don't think if
But Dana Perino's not with him,
and
so I'm going to go with George Washington because
very good. We never knew his press secretary.
Yeah, we never knew his press secretary. Bill Clinton and Donald Trump.
Oh, I'll go Trump all the way.
I'll go Trump with that one.
Clinton is not a fighter.
No, not to mention that in President Trump's corner, I'm sure he would have lovely models and stuff, and Bill's game would be off.
Absolutely.
Not to mention Hillary would be
former
watching.
Accusers.
Yeah, Hillary asking him to take the dive to push the cause. Ulysses S. Grant and Lyndon Johnson. Ulysses.
Shorter though, LBJ would have the reach.
He would have the reach, but Ulysses he's a tough guy. And
he slept on the outside,
and he's not afraid to whiskey it up and get after it.
Tyrus, we're gonna have to leave it there.
Hold on, but I'm telling you, Teddy Roosevelt wins this in a wash.
Absolutely,
he dominates. Teddy Roosevelt wins. The man invented teddy bears from murdering grizzlies and making national parks. So I got Teddy Roosevelt.
This was an act of domestic terrorism. Now, we as members of Congress take an oath to protect the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
When the threat that was metastasizing was a threat of white nationalist domestic terror. If you can't diagnose the threat, if you can't speak directly to the threat, you can't respond to the threat.
It seems as though white men invoking white supremacy and engaging in mass shootings are almost immune from being labeled domestic terrorists in their violence.
You understand what's going on here? That is all the Democrats that you know quite well condemning January 6th and various other events that they thought the plague of white supremacy. Remember General Milley, that spineless central chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff? Remember he says, I want to find out about white rage. So then it's okay to talk about it. But you're watching people who have electric cars being targeted, and it's not a big deal. It's something to laugh about with Jimmy Kimmel. It's something that you should mock Elon Musk. I mean, you realize he just took 2 astronauts out of the sky because Boeing couldn't. He has connected the entire world with Starlink. And now he's also working on a robot, a Tesla robot, that you have to see this thing. Go to Tesla.com. This thing is going to be ready for your house soon. I think it's going to be like $30,000. So I'm not sure if it's going to end up in Altadena or Harlem yet. But I think that it'll be something that upper middle class people have. And maybe in 5 years, a lot of people have. And it's not just a luxury for a bartender. You might have it for senior care in order to be an emergency operator. You have to see it act. You think I'm crazy until you see it. He's doing this. I mean, it's just crazy to me that we're targeting the Ben Franklin, Henry Ford, the Da Vinci of our age, the guy that just is multifaceted, who's an expert in manufacturing, business structuring, as well as inventing and motivation. Jerry in Dalton, New York. Hey, Jerry.
Hello there. How are you?
Good. What's on your mind?
I just wanted to say many years ago, it was probably 35 years ago or maybe even more, Chuck Schumer was running for office and he came around. Our block was having a block party. So I guess he figured, try and drum up as many votes as he could. So he said, can I get your vote? I said, well, why don't you sit down, have a cheeseburger, and, we'll talk about your politics. He's like, oh, I can't. I'm too busy. I got other things to do. And I said, well, if you're too busy to sit down and have a cheeseburger, then I'm too busy to vote for you. Well, this man plopped his butt right down on the bench and sat and ate a cheeseburger. So after he ate it, he goes, do I have your vote? And I said, yeah, sure. I never voted for him, figuring if a cheeseburger can bribe him, what else could?
Yeah.
What else could?
He's a political animal. He doesn't stand for anything. And to get into leadership and now decide that you're going to decide you're going to try to hold on to your position and to not do anything as a Jewish American with the anti-Semitism. Look, he's a political operative. Anybody in that spot has got to get votes, constantly whipping votes. But he does nothing ever to reach across the aisle, and he's never provided much leadership. He was in the majority for a long time. He did nothing to build out a budget. He was looking for omnibus after omnibus, and now he's paying the price because we have a CR on what he created, and we're about to do things on normal order. And if you think he's going to get the Senate back, I think he's got a long way to go for that.